Welcome to House Highlights, a weekly Facebook livecast and podcast focused on Maryland politics. I'm Eric Luedtke, Majority Leader in the Maryland House of Delegates, and each week I interview one of my awesome colleagues to help you learn more about them and the work they're doing. You can tune in each Tuesday live at 6 p.m. on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Eric for Maryland. And you can watch recorded interviews at that same spot on Facebook, or you can listen to them in a podcast format on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. We're up to like 6 podcast listeners a week now, which is very exciting. That's going a little slower than the Facebook audience. This week we have with us Dr. Delegate Michelle Guyton, who represents District 42B in the Maryland House. Delegate Guyton we've become personal friends now because we serve on the same committee together, but she's also got a really amazing background. She's a PhD in developmental psychology, right?
That is correct, yes.
PhD in developmental psychology. She's been active for a long time as a disabilities advocate, and she served as a member of the Maryland State Board of Education before she was elected to the House. That election happened in 2018, so still relatively new at this, but already very much making her mark. And she serves now on the Ways and Means Committee, where she's become a really important voice. I'm gonna try to make you blush a little bit here, Dr. Guyton. A really vital voice, particularly on education issues, was like a key part of the discussions around the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, the Kerwin bill, and a bunch of other issues too. So welcome, Michelle. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Majority Leader. I don't need to say anything else. That sounded great.
Oh, good. Okay, good. We can just cut it off right here. We're done.
That's good. We can just leave the meeting.
Yeah, right. So we like to start off with a softball question for you.
Okay, great.
Get things going. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. Where'd you grow up? What do you do outside of legislative work? Why'd you run for office?
Awesome. So I actually grew up in a little tiny town on the Gulf Coast called Bay Minette, Alabama. Nobody will have ever heard of it, and you probably won't ever hear of it. It was very Mayberry-like, actually. So it was, it was a lovely place to grow up, but it wasn't a place that I could see myself staying forever. Mm-hmm. So, going to college, I've lived in 7 states since then, coming back to Maryland and settling in Maryland for good about 20 years ago. So I think, a lot of people run on, I've always lived here, I've always been here, but I chose Maryland, every place from, Boston to San Francisco to North Carolina to Iowa. I feel like it's actually a benefit to me as a legislator to have lived in so many places, to have been in that many different kinds of communities and be able to relate to people from, the farmers I lived with 7 years in Iowa to the folks out in San Francisco. So, right. And that's what my district looks like. It's incredibly diverse politically, and so I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and your district kind of stretches all across northern Baltimore County, yeah. Kind of like these more suburban communities all the way up to the Pennsylvania line, right?
Sure.
Like representing a district with that many different sort of types of communities in it.
Sure, I have my little, I'll do the Vanna White thing here for the 42B, which is the craziest, largest, longest districts in the world. I'm convinced. Definitely hard to canvass in. But let me back up and answer your actual question. So why did I do this? You mentioned I have a PhD in psychology, and my original plan was to be a college professor and to develop policy and early intervention programs for families at risk, because that's what I studied. And I did that for a few years. And then I had children with special needs. So 3 actually, who all ended up with IEPs in school. And like most parents, you do what you have to do. It wasn't what I had planned, but it's where the universe led me. And I had the background and the knowledge to be able to advocate for them in a way that, and for other kids, in a way some other parents couldn't. So, once, and anybody out there who has kids who have special needs understands this, once I stopped curling up and crying and curling up in a ball and crying, I dealt with that anxiety and that depression and that sadness that it does bring by actually trying to do something about it. And I try to be very open about mental health issues because that's what I do. I have always had a lot of anxiety, and if I didn't actually try to act on that and make things better, that's how I deal with it. So in some ways it's selfish, but you hope helps other people. Through that advocacy work, I was appointed to the Maryland State Board of Education, sort of like their disabilities mental health person that they needed at that time.
Right.
When this seat became open in 2018, and honestly, it was right after the Trump election, and I was in that same place. I was like, do I curl up in a ball and like stress out about this, or do I look at, these candidates who I don't think represent me and my values and the people in my district, at least a great number of them, and just throw myself in there. And so I did. No one ever thought I could win, because no Democrat has been able to do that in this district. But we worked really hard. I had this amazing supportive volunteer team that is still working super hard for me, and we did it. And I'm happy about that, but I'm also really proud that the people here were willing to elect me. I got a lot of crossover votes. So I think connecting with people, you asked about my district. My district is incredibly diverse politically.
Right.
And yeah, the people, and I'll get my little map again because I love it. The people down here, which are below the Beltway, basically in Baltimore City and Parkville and East Houston, they have very different concerns than these folks up here on the edge of Pennsylvania.
Right.
Honestly, I'm dealing with rat infestation down here in Parkville, and they've got bears they're calling me out up here. So I mean, that just kind of gives you
That's quite a range of wildlife there.
It is quite a range of wildlife. I try to stay away from snakes, but other than that, we do what we can. But really, everybody has the same needs, right? We want families who are safe. They want to be able to support their families. They want good healthcare and great schools. I mean, schools, that's something that resonates with people. And I believe that is one of the main reasons that I was elected up here, because that is what we care about. I also think they want representation that's really responsive to them. And that is not always something that people get. So the one thing that I am really proud of is that my staff is amazing, and we work way more than we should, in a position like this. But right now, in a pandemic time, my constituents need somebody who is going to be on their side. And that's what I want to be, and that's what we are.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I have a district that's not unlike yours in that it's got this. It goes from more urbanized areas to more rural areas, and I actually, when I won back in 2010 in my primary, I did better than any of the other Democratic candidates in the most conservative part of my district. I don't know if your experience has been similar. People ask me, like, how'd you get all these conservative voters to vote for you? And I said, I went and talked to them and asked what they wanted and told them I'd work on issues that mattered to them. I mean, is that your experience too? It's just a question of people feeling like they need to be heard?
Absolutely. And nobody, when somebody calls my office, and I know you're the same way. Like, I never ask whether they're a registered Democrat or Republican or independent. Right. I don't care. Like, I'm happy to be able to serve them and try to make their lives a little bit better. And that sounds like a cliche, but it's actually really, really true. Especially right now, there's so many people living, and whenever we can make a difference, and we can't always, but we always try. It's a huge win, and it I'll get upset thinking about it. But I think being part of the community, having kids who have gone to the school up north, the one school like way up here, boarding, and knowing those people and having them understand that, my priorities are the same. If we are in different political parties, the priorities are really the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's good schools, it's jobs, it's government providing good services. I get you. So let's talk about good services. Let's talk about education in particular for a second.
Okay.
Deep wealth of experience on special ed issues, and that's I've done a lot of work on too. I'm passionate about. It's one of the ways I think you and I first became sort of friends in the legislature. But I'm curious what your thoughts are about special ed right now, as kids with special needs are dealing with the challenges of schooling in the pandemic and remote learning. What are some of your concerns about how things are working?
Yeah, and I know that you really do care about these kids, honestly. I mean, and you feel it the same way that I do. I could talk about that all day, to be honest. We don't have that kind of time, but I am very concerned that kids, particularly with complex learning needs and with social emotional needs in particular, are just not getting the kind of service that they need to, not only to thrive. I mean, that's more than we can almost hope for at this time, but even to progress, not to fall back and regress, which is what we're seeing in so many kids and families. And that right now is what's keeping me up at night. I know I've said that to you before. It's actually true. Parents come to me because I've been involved in this work for a long time, and they also know I understand it. Not all kids are doing poorly in this situation. I have a son with social anxiety. He loved being out of school last year.
Right.
Was it the best thing for him? No, it wasn't. It was the easiest thing for him. So there are exceptions and different things, but parents with kids, particularly with complex needs, do not have the training. I mean, I don't have the training, and I have a PhD. You probably don't have the training, and you long-term educator to provide the really specialized services and particularly related services that they need. And so, we're hearing about kids regressing verbally, socially, acting out, becoming dangerous to their parents and to themselves. And really, it does break my heart. And I think that there are skills that you can lose that you cannot regain. It's certainly not at the same rate that you would have had them otherwise. I mean, it's why we spend so much time investing in early intervention, right?
Right.
Identification and getting kids the services they need as soon as we can, because we know that if you wait too long and you don't hit their brains during that really critical period of development where they need, particularly language, for instance, and social development, you may not be able to actually catch up later. And if they do catch up, they're going to certainly be way, way behind their peers, even further than they would have been before. I also want to say that I'm just as concerned about our kids who are living in poverty, our kids who are living in stressed family situations. I mean, this is a population I worked with quite often before I got into this world.
Right.
Kids in foster care, in sort of untenable and unstable families, and those who don't speak English as a first language, or whose parents are not proficient enough to actually help them through virtual learning situation. We also have quite a few kids, both in Baltimore City and other places in the state, but in my district, up here in that donut hole, that don't have internet service. So all of that piled on is really detrimental to student learning. And I think that those gaps that we're always so worried about shrinking are just getting larger and larger. And it's not just an issue of disability versus disability. It really has to do with the parents who can provide the services and pay for the learning pods and the tutors and the private schools and those. I mean, that's really where the divide is just going to grow beyond, I don't mean to be so pessimistic about it, because I'm not, because I think there's salvageable. These things are salvageable.
But it's a challenging time for any kid that's got any type of special need. Right.
Or any kind of challenge at all.
Right.
Any kind of challenge at all. I mean, we also spend a lot of time, I volunteer quite often at food distribution in our and so, you got kids who are food insecure, and housing insecure. I mean, those are all things that are just getting bigger and bigger. And the stresses on families right now are incredible. So, I don't think, and I want to go on the record because I want people to understand where I stand. I do not think, and I am not advocating for teachers and students to flood back into the classrooms, right? I think we have to be safe.
Right.
I also think we have to respect the sort of the choices that both teachers and families want to make about that.
Right.
We have to have a plan in place, which I'm not convinced that we have a great plan in place right now. And that's what we owe our teachers and we owe our families, right? But I also do think that the school systems, the administration, both the state, MSD, and the county systems have a responsibility to get creative and be proactive about providing the services that these kids desperately need and to which they're legally entitled. Not only is it an ethical and educational issue, it's going to be a huge financial issue for the state of Maryland when these parents start suing, and they already are, for compensatory services for their kids. kids who are not getting what they need. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to lecture about that.
No.
Strongly about it. I don't have all the answers, I'll be honest, but I know we need to do something more than what's happening now. And I do feel a great responsibility for that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, there's a lot of, there's no right answer, right?
Okay.
It's such a difficult time, and that conflict between trying to, keep folks safe and trying to make sure we're providing the type of education kids need is a really difficult, issue to figure out. But I agree with you. Part of, I think, why parents and teachers are so frustrated has been the lack of guidance, right?
Lack of guidance, lack of communication.
Yeah, I'm personally, I think MSDE has done a terrible job, helping school systems plan this out and figure this out. Some of the school systems have adapted better than others, but it's a total patchwork across the state.
Absolutely. And that's often an issue in education in Maryland. And I want to address that, that local control piece. But I can tell you that I was very disappointed in the guidance that we got from MSD. As someone who used to be there and knowing that, or feeling very strongly that if, I think I may have said this to you directly, if it's the only time I wish I were still on the board. I at least would have been really loud. I can do that, right? about being proactive, about giving more guidance, about making sure that the counties, the locals had the tools, the training, the guidance that they needed. But I can tell you the systems are doing some of them better than others. I agree. But the systems are not doing what they need to do either. Even at this time, we're now what, 7-8 months into this?
Right.
We should have a good idea of what works and what doesn't. And we shouldn't be, sort of cobbling it together at this point. But I feel like we are.
Yeah. So what are your priorities then for the coming legislative session in terms of addressing this gap? I mean, Buzzy Heddleman, who's well known in education, sort of just wrote an editorial about providing more tutoring over the summer. What do you think we need to be doing?
You know what? And I actually do have a piece of legislation. I'll be bringing it to you soon. That I'm working with several major advocacy groups with disabilities, and that is really addressing not so much what's happening right in this moment, but what could happen in the future. So what we're asking is that we learn from what's going on right now, and that we be prepared for any shutdown that we need to have in the future. So that this is basically legislation to streamline the special education process, so that if in any event we run into a situation, an emergency situation where kids have to miss more than 10 days of school, which is where they start getting into trouble, that we already know what's going to happen. It's in their IEPs, it's in their 504s, and everyone can figure it out ahead of time, so that we're not doing, scrambling around for 5, 6, 7 months. And then the other piece of that, which I'm really invested in, is that we have kids who are now at the end of their educational journey with us. And what's, transition period. So those people out there who don't understand what that means, basically special education kids have a transition period where they're supposed to be trained for jobs or ready for college. But the idea for all of our kids in education is that we don't just graduate them and they can do nothing, right? If we fail to actually give them the ability and the skills to be independent and to provide for themselves and to contribute to society, then really the rest of it to me doesn't matter. These kids right now in their, and they can go to school until 21 if they're not diploma track kids, they're not getting that job training, right? We're all virtual. So we might be working in stores, or they might be working on the farms, and they may be learning different trades. They don't have those opportunities right now. And so part of this legislation is also to try to ensure that even if it means they stay in school a little bit past their 21st birthday, that they get what they need so they graduate with what they deserve.
Oh, that's a great idea. That's a great
a couple of other, I'm bringing back a wonderful bill that you're familiar with from last year to allow cameras in special education classrooms. I think this year has actually changed that conversation quite a bit, because everyone's been virtual, everyone's been on film. Whereas last year people were very afraid of that, showing kids on video. I mean, we've kind of gotten used to it now, but In between last session, when I introduced this bill, and this session, or even now, there have been some really egregious problems in special education classrooms. There have been more abuses than before. So I think we really have a responsibility to protect these kids. And
the cameras are a way to keep them safe. I mean,
the cameras are a way for us to know what's really going on. And we're talking about the most vulnerable kids, the ones who are not verbal. Like, they can't tell you where the bruises came from.
Right.
It protects both the kids and the teachers. So I'm bringing that one back. And then I'm also introducing legislation this is not just for the special education community, but for everybody. Ban hate symbols in Maryland state schools, public schools. So this is a project that I worked with in my district this year and for Baltimore County through Black Lives Matter and a group of young people who started this petition. Mm-hmm. We still have Confederate battle flags. We still have swastika on clothing, on folders, on bags, on trucks in the parking lot. And if this isn't the time for us to rid ourselves of those symbols and make all students feel comfortable in school, then I don't know when we can do it. So taking it out of Baltimore County, which I think will be there, and just making it a statewide piece of legislation.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. All right, well, let's turn to more fun topics. So
yay.
District 42B, true or false, or maybe we should call it Dr. Delegate Michelle Guyton, true or false. Okay. So
I'm going to give you of those. Yeah.
I'm going to give you a true or false question. You have to answer it, and then you can offer a little bit of an explanation if you want. So first of all, true or false, you have walked around on the roof of the Cow Palace.
True. I have walked around on the roof of the Cow Palace. And for those of you who don't know, it was both exhilarating and frightening. It is very tall. This is one of the biggest buildings at the Maryland State Fair, which is in my district. And I wasn't just walking around there for fun. They were actually installing a huge solar array on top of most of the big buildings at the Maryland State Fairgrounds. So they gave me a tour. I got to go up in the cherry picker, which was a little spooky, actually. And the worst part is I don't have the best balance on a great day. So I'm walking around on this really uneven surface trying to film it all. And I definitely came close to falling off a few times. But
oh no.
State Fair is a really important treasure in my district, honestly, not only for everything they do for the state during the state fair, but it's a wonderful educational opportunity for lots of kids, for the community. You can have meetings there. We do our police training there. We do our food distributions there and our COVID testing there. I mean, this is really an amazing service provider for our district. Unfortunately, the state fair is old. It's 170 years old, and there are parts of it that are not real pretty anymore and not real safe. For instance, they don't have an ADA accessible elevator, right? So problems there that we need to fix. So I'm always fighting for the state fair because I believe in what it offers to the district and what it offers to the state.
Right.
It would just be such a shame to see it, not thrive the way that it should, because they give so much back. They are also really, really important to the ag community in North County. And, you've seen my map a few times now, everything from about halfway up is farmland. It's called the Erdl. It's a sort of preserved area for farmland. And it's really unusual and special. And, we need to respect the agricultural community. We need to work with them. It's not something that's outdated. It's something that's really integral to our economy now. Right. And people forget that. I think they forget how important it really, really is. So I've learned a lot about these things that I never knew before. I've learned about, hemp farming, for instance, lately, because it's become a big issue in our district, and trying to learn as much as I can about balancing, the right of the farmers and the rights of the citizens. So it's complicated, but I'm much smarter than when I was elected.
I'll tell you what, I didn't know much at all about agricultural issues before I was elected. And then, sat down with farmers in my district, started working on these issues. It really I mean, it's a fascinating industry and has policy issues growing out of it. But so related to farming, true or false, there are more horses in your district than people.
Okay, I have been told this, so I prove it to you, but this is what the horse industry has told me, you know, so I have been told that I have more horses than people, and it would not surprise me if that were the case, but I can't prove it. So I don't want this to come up like on a campaign flyer or anything. It is a huge industry up here, and it's more than that. It's more than an industry. People love their horses. I mean, I love horses. I don't ride them that often. I don't have one, but they're very attached to the horses. It's a big part of our economy. Our schools have them, our therapy programs have them there. I mean, it's just an amazing part of what we have to offer that's special and in North County. And it's something we definitely need to preserve.
Yeah, I think most people don't realize how big of an industry it is. I mean, we have more horses per capita than any state in the country, right? Where the Kentucky Derby is. So
right. Well, and it's more than an industry. So I had a bill this year, well, 2 bills this year. One was sort of a puppy farm horse bill, right? That basically said, you couldn't just breed horses, incorrectly and abuse them, which didn't pass this year. But I did pass a bill that actually protected those horses that aren't so much part of the industry, which I really liked. It was sort of an egalitarian horse bill, right? It was that aren't worth $1 million because they're race horses and thoroughbreds, but are actually like your working regular Joe horses that also should be protected from abuse, that were not until this bill passed. So I'm like excited about that.
That's great. That's great. All right, let's close out. We're almost out of time, so we're gonna go to the final fun question. This is not particularly high stakes unless you're like people in my Twitter feed that have been telling me lately that they don't like crab cakes, which is I
like crab cakes.
Yeah, good. So 3 questions. First of all, what is your favorite Maryland place? Second, what is your favorite Maryland food? And third, what is your favorite Maryland related pop culture item? Could be music, movie, book, anything.
Oh, I got it. This is easy. Food's easy. Crab cakes. I love crabs. Love crabs. I don't like picking them because I don't like to get all nasty, but I love to eat them. Okay. So come back and get me, but I love the crabs. My favorite place is actually right outside and down the hill from my house, which is the Gunpowder State Park River, the Gunpowder River. And I spend a lot of time there with some girlfriends. We call ourselves the Moncton Yacht Club, which means we have tubes, right? Tubes and kayaks, right? And then we go out and we float around and we hang out and we chill out. It's beautiful. It's just an amazing resource. And it's one that a lot of other people have found this summer during the shutdown. And so we're pleased to share that and make that accessible to the rest of the state. So please come up and enjoy that. Absolutely gorgeous. And then pop culture, I think this is kind of a weird one. So not John Waters necessarily himself, but like the whole quirky, creative vibe that Maryland has. It's like this wonderful Hairspray is my favorite. So I do a lot of theater in Baltimore. There are a lot of creatives. I've done Hairspray, the show, twice as the antagonist. I just think that whole quirky, creative, Northern, Southern, we accept everyone.
Right.
That Maryland has, the Visionary Arts Museum, the VSO, and the Walters and BMA, all within this all Baltimore, but it's everywhere. The little things everywhere, the music, it's really, really special. So that's not one answer, but it's like the whole.
Oh no, I think that's the best answer we've gotten to that question so far. And it's, Baltimore.
Awesome.
Such a great arts town, and it's so underappreciated for the arts. So I'm glad you said that. Plus, Gunpowder State Park is one of the few state parks in Maryland that I've never been to. So we're gonna have to come up and visit you and explore Gunpowder with you.
We'll give you the Moncton Yacht Club tour.
Great. Well, Dr. Delegate Michelle Guyton, thanks for taking time to chat with us. It's been a lot of fun. Appreciate everyone listening in. And we'll see you next time here on House Highlights. Have a good one, Michelle.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.